a deep pain as a result of this extremely dangerous act.
الذي أصاب عددا من المؤسسات الأمريكية
which hurt many American institutions
وأوقع العديد من الضحايا الأبرياء من أبناء الشعب الأمريكي الصديق
and caused many casualties among the friendly American people.
الضحايا الأبرياء
innocent American victims.
إننا ندين هذا العمل الإجرامي الأليم.
We condemn this criminal, painful act.
ونعرب عن تعاطفنا مع أسر الشهداء الضحايا.
We express our sympathy to the families of the victims.
ولقد أرسلت رسالة لفخامة الرئيس بوش.
I have sent President Bush a message of condolences.
معبرا عن مشاعري ومشاعر الشعب الفلسطيني الأليمة بهذا الحدث المروع.
In which I have expressed my and the Palestinian people's sad feelings in regard of this horrible act.
ووضعت فيها إمكانياتنا المتواضعة تحت تصرفه في هذه المحنة الصعبة.
I also conveyed to His Excellency our readiness to put all of our humble capabilities at his disposal at this time of sorrow.
God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.
And the Palestinian leader also denounced certain scenes that were on display in the streets here in East Jerusalem. A small number of people who were showing their support for that action, those terror actions in the United States. Also in the town of Nablus on the West Bank. Here they were in Jerusalem. There were only a small crowd, but there was a crowd of several thousand in the town of Nablus, where cries of God is great and support for the terror actions against the United States. The distribution by people of candy, a traditional show of a sentiment of support and of delight. That very much a reflection of the anti-U.S. sentiment that has been spreading throughout the Middle East because of the United States' perceived support of Israel in the ongoing year-long now bloody confrontation. And indeed that confrontation has been deepening overnight with some intense fighting around the town of Jenin in the northern part of the West Bank. A number of Palestinians reported killed in that intense fighting.
All right, Gerald Kessel updating us from Jerusalem. Thanks, Jim.
Well, along with the condolences that are pouring in, there are also questions being asked, and one of those questions is how were the hijackers able to board the plane in the first place? We get more on that and the situation with airport security from Charles Feldman.
When TWA Flight 800 exploded after taking off from Kennedy Airport in 1996, U.S. transportation officials were already at work revising domestic aviation security. New screening measures at airports were put into effect. Passengers were required to show picture IDs. All this, even though TWA 800 turned out not to be an act of terrorism. So, how could 4 airliners be hijacked on the very same day? The fact is, terrorism experts say, there is no realistic way to stop terrorists bent on a suicide mission. Terrorism expert Brian Jenkins.
Years ago, I was asked by a congressman, Mr. Jenkins, if I gave you all of the resources that you wanted and all the authority that you needed, could you guarantee that there would not be another hijacking? My answer was, yes, sir, I can. We ground all of the airplanes.
Making matters worse, when various government agencies and news organizations test airport security around the nation, it often comes up short. Published reports from 1999 show that Boston's Logan Airport, from which 2 of the hijacked planes originated, had at least 136 security violations over a 2-year period, this when federal aviation agents tested security there. And just this July, the Transportation Department announced it was seeking almost $100,000 in penalties against American Airlines for having lax security on at least 6 flights checked by special agents. American, which had 2 of its planes hijacked in the attacks, says the proposed fine covered alleged procedural failures involving checked baggage and not failures at security checkpoints. So what happened to all the heightened security?
It's not that the measures are at fault. It is that over a period of time, absent a major threat, there is always the temptation to do business as usual and to forget for a moment that this threat is real, remains real.
But at least for the near future, business will certainly not be as usual.
There will be higher levels of surveillance, more stringent searches. Airport curbside luggage check-in will no longer be allowed. There will be more security officers and random identification checks.
But we are a nation that likes to move fast. We are impatient with long lines and security checkpoints that slow our travel down. So, if history is any lesson, security over time will again get lax. Terrorists can count on it. Charles Feldman, CNN, Los Angeles.
Now, it probably is not difficult to gauge the mood of the American people at a time like this. Gallup pollsters did that Tuesday afternoon, though, making telephone calls that no one ever imagined would be necessary. Joining us now from Princeton, New Jersey, is pollster Frank Newport with more on that. Frank?
Indeed, Jim, this was our poll together with a scientific sample, the immediate reactions of the American public taken Tuesday night, the 11th of September. We've heard the term on a lot of this coverage, war. We ask Americans, do you consider this an act of war or not? Evidence is pretty clear, as you can see here. 86%, almost 9 out of 10 Americans agree that it is an act of war. However, when it comes to military response, we do get a sense of restraint from the American public. We offered 3 possible alternatives for retaliation: immediate strikes against known terrorist operations, even if we don't know exactly who did it. The middle alternative was strike, but only after evidence of exactly who did it, even if that takes months, and no military action at all. Obviously, Americans want military action, but look at this. Significant majority of Americans say wait until it's known exactly who did it, then military action. The reaction emotionally, we've seen in a lot of the coverage, is very, very strong. In fact, we find here that 87%, almost 90% of Americans, including a lot of older Americans who lived through Pearl Harbor, tell us this is the most tragic news event that they have witnessed in their life. Worry about themselves or their family being involved in terrorist activities, that's up. We've tracked that measure, unfortunately, going back to Oklahoma City. It was 42% then in the mid-90s. It had fallen. Just last night, you can see 58% of Americans say they're at least somewhat worried about the possibility of a terrorist attack. Finally, confidence in President Bush to handle the situation is high, very and somewhat confident. We've got almost 8 out of 10 Americans expressing confidence that he will handle the situation. Jim, that's an update on the immediate reaction of the American public. Back to you.
All right, Frank, thank you for that report. Colleen.
All right, Jim, thanks. Well, relief agencies say that they are rushing blood supplies both to New York and Washington, and they say Americans are rolling up their sleeves, quite literally, nationwide to make sure that there is enough blood to treat the wounded. Thelma Gutierrez reports now from Los Angeles.
At the American Red Cross in the heart of Los Angeles, a long line formed outside the door. Dozens waited to come in and donate blood.
I lived in New York for about 12 years, so I really wish that I were there to help more directly. So this is the little I can do.
Inside was a scene staff members say they had never witnessed before. Donors, hundreds of them, lined the corridors, sitting on the floor and any place else they could find space, waiting for their names to be called.
I have never seen this type of turnout. I've been here for 5 years. This turnout is just, it's amazing. It's amazing how when a tragedy like this happens, people are just moved to do something, anything they can to show that they care.
15 Red Cross technicians drew blood while volunteers kept the lines moving. They were overwhelmed by the response. One Red Cross center estimates 250 units of blood was collected on Tuesday, an unprecedented amount in one day. The problem remains in how to transport the supply. According to a spokeswoman, the blood must first be tested. The Red Cross is negotiating with the military to deliver the supply to the East Coast. The wait to give blood at one Southern California center was up to 5 hours, but the staff said no one complained. Thelma Gutierrez, CNN, Los Angeles.
Well, we're going to continue with our coverage of this day of disaster, the attack on America, And we're going to be joined by John Mann and Relitza Vasilova here to take over for us, Colleen.
That's right. They're moving in. We're moving out. I'm Colleen McEdwards.
And I'm Jim Clancy. As we go, we want to recap here some of the latest pictures that we have in. This is from Lower Manhattan, the scene of the devastation today in what is undoubtedly going to be the worst terror attack in the history of the United States. A terror attack that may change everything, that Americans themselves overwhelmingly see as nothing short of an act of war.
Mark, turn around.